feeling is lack of energy, depression,
Right.
and sometimes anxiety.
Epictetus said, and we've quoted him on the show, we are disturbed not by what happens to us, but by our thoughts about what happens. Quick story. I'm working with a client who loves to do home projects, except now he doesn't. He says, I loathe doing all my home projects. And I'm giving him a contrast I was telling him stories about what's going on here in the home, because we've just moved in a new home.
We've been nothing but
and
new home projects.
Come to find out that he's just down on life. He's down on himself. And so the things that were once enjoyable, happy, engaging, challenging are no longer. He's thinking, I don't want to do that. So how's he going to feel?
No. Well, and you think about this really ties into resilience. Why do some people go through something really difficult? Like two people go through the same experience and they have two different outcomes.
Correct.
Why does one become full of anxiety and what does the other one just bounce off and let it shut off of them,
So in Christmas time, oftentimes we will look at things in the Christmas season and we're real familiar with this and we might go into resistance. My neighbor has Christmas lights up on. I don't know if you saw it.
They already do.
Yeah, he has
I saw some others down the road.
Yeah.
So
there are some people who go, oh, already?
Right.
No Christmas music except in December.
Exactly.
And these are people, they're familiar with it and they're in resistance to it. Doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It just means they're in resistance to it because there's negative energy surrounding it. That's not they have Christmas lights on. It's, they got Christmas lights on.
Well, we're new to Texas, and Texans go out big on decorations, especially.
Oh, Halloween was amazing.
Yeah, Halloween's over the top from anything else we've experienced. And then I've heard the same with Christmas. And so, yeah, everybody gears up because we're actually where we're speaking right now. We're still in November, but you're going to hear this in December. And so they start early here. They definitely do. And I'm feeling like, ooh, I've got to culturally assimilate.
You see, it isn't the Christmas traditions that bother people. It's what they think about the Christmas traditions that bother them.
And where do those thoughts come from? A lot of it comes from their family of origin. So if that's not been a place for you to analyze things, use Christmas as a way to analyze, what do I feel about the world Christmas / Christmas,
right.
Because where it came from for my family.
So if you've ever seen a Christus statue, and I believe, I can't remember the name of the artist on this particular one, but
I believe Danish. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people are not disturbed by looking at a statue of Christ, but by their thoughts about it. Perhaps they'll see a graven image.
Because of the commandment.
Thou shalt not worship, right? Maybe they're going to see tyranny. They're going to think of the Crusades. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, in the name of God, we have more people dying or more people who've been killed than anything else. Well, it's a complete false statement, but it's what they think about it. And so, they could have misguided beliefs such as that. Mm-hmm. Other people might see a reminder of the glory and the love of the Savior, but they don't worship the statue. It's how they perceive that. So we used initially the term immaculate perception. That's really what's going on.
So I have a question, because your grandparents were really funny about certain things. How did your grandparents feel about the Christus statue?
They loved it.
They loved it.
Yeah.
But how did they feel about if they saw a Catholic cross?
They hated it. Right. No, it's exactly right.
But can you not look at another religion's
but that's the whole point.
Icon, in a sense, not to worship it, but to have your own impression.
What really bothered me as I started becoming aware of this is how different denominations within the Christian movement would attack each other.
Right.
That never made sense to me.
Or their symbols.
Or their symbols, or what they cherished, what they believed in their heart of hearts. Well, every single person there probably started that way from youth on. There are converts to the different religious denominations. Back in the days of Jesus Christ or just before it, a lot of women would join the Jewish movement because it was the safest of all movements to be a part of.
Well, it was the safest place for women.
Right. For women.
There weren't a lot of movements available to women.
Yeah, the movement probably wasn't the right word, but I'm just trying to. Yeah. It really is a culture.
Safest community.
Yeah, that's the right word. While some people feel that the Christmas tree or the wreaths are pagan and they're symbols that remove Christ from Christmas, we got to think about the history on this. So putting into context, God commanded Joshua to set up 12 stones. He stacked these stones up to remind the Israelites that God parted the waters of the River Jordan. But they didn't worship the stones. They were
a symbolic reminder.
Yeah. And then if you remember, this story was, as a kid, it was fascinating. God, the children of Israel, as they were escaping Egypt, were in the wilderness, and they were being bitten by serpents. Mm-hmm. And they were dying from the bites. And so God commanded Moses to raise somewhat of a cross and then put a brass serpent on it, depicting a snake. And all they had to do was to look at it. But thousands of them wouldn't. What drove someone who was going to die? They'd been bitten by a serpent, but they wouldn't look at a brazen serpent because it was also a symbol of Christ. It could be the symbol of Lucifer too. He was depicted as the serpent.
It looks like what's been attacking them. So fear, anxiety. Sometimes we have to face the thing that we have to, really face our trial.
But to me, it was, and this is now coming from a psychologist standpoint, what was the story they were telling themselves that wasn't true that eventually led to their death? And how many of us do that today? How many of us engage just in everyday life in stories that aren't true about others? I mean, you look at the political division in our country right now. I don't know if it's ever been this deep, but it's pretty thick. So, and let's finish this segment on this. This is a fun one.
Yeah. Okay. So growing up in the 70s, I also, as a kid, growing up during that time frame, became aware of commercials that showed Xmas. You would see it on billboards, you'd see it at the mall, and it was, Merry Xmas and all of that. And I asked my mom one day, like, why is it Xmas? And she says, because it's shorter to write. And so sometimes on cards, people would write Merry Xmas.
Right.
And it was kind of a thing back in the 70s. And I assumed it was a thing from the 70s. And then as I got older, I thought, well, that's kind of demeaning to take Christ out of Christmas and replace Christ with an X.
Well, it's interesting because if I've done this, I probably presented this close to 1,000 different people in my home.
Right. And you're using visuals. And so this big red neon Xmas PowerPoint slide. And people have a visceral reaction like, yeah, that is not that's the commercialism of Christmas.
I'd say the overwhelming majority of people that I show this slide to, or I ask them, what do you think of Xmas?
It's a visceral reaction, right?
It's visceral. So now we go back to the very beginning of the segment. It's not the Xmas that bothers people. It's what they think about the Xmas.
And for me, it was where it came from. And my mom explained it. And it was the 70s culture thing. I mean, back to weird colored Christmas trees and psychedelic.
Boy, do I remember that.
Yeah. Tinfoil trees. And those kind of actually
tinsel.
Coming back right now.
So, people are offended with happy holidays instead of Merry Christmas, right? And they're offended sometimes because what's happening here is they're seeing commercialism, paganism.
And that's the only thing it can be.
Yeah. And some people are offended by Santa Claus.
Now, here's the application of the principle of a lifelong learner.
Okay, so could I just throw one thing in here? There's one professor that Dr. Shelley quotes who uses an anagram with Santa and says, well, it's Satan. It's how he perceives it. And they use the term Noel, Noel, to say there's no God, because El is the singular for God. Hebrew. Elohim is the plural of God. Mm-hmm. So Noel is no God, well, because we don't celebrate Noel. And so what we're getting at, and we're going to actually answer the Christmas or the Xmas in the next segment.
And no, we don't think Santa is Satan. And no, we don't think Noel means no God, just to clarify, from our personal perspective.
Right, but that's what I'm suggesting.
That people go
This is where
far.
People go.
Yeah.
And they're giving permission for things of this nature to actually control their happiness. Again, from a psychologist standpoint, they're medicating. This is how they're getting through it because they're in total resistance to something that could be uplifting, balancing, and bring the holiday cheer comes to mind. Well, it's also the time where most people commit suicide.
Yeah, it is an anxious time for people.
So we want to actually bring more of a cognitive approach and give you a different pathway on which to travel this Christmas season. Start asking questions. Asking yourself, is this a tradition or is this really happening? What is an empathetic approach to understanding the Christmas story? So we look forward to sharing more in the next segment, and we'll see you then.
And we'll solve the mystery of Merry Xmas.
See you then.
Inside my head, I try to turn it down, but I can't quite drown it out. I'm tortured every day, these never-ending worries pulling on my sleeve.